She hadn't spoken a single word in 5 years, not even a whisper. No doctor, no therapy, not even love could break the silence. Until one day, on a quiet country road, her family's car stopped in front of a bleeding, motionless bull. And what happened next? It changed everything. A voice lost to trauma suddenly returned. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and like the video. We share powerful real-life stories just like this one. And hey, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's jump into the story. The silence in the room was heavy, like fog that wouldn't lift. Nora sat still in the chair, her small hands folded in her lap. She was 8 years old and hadn't spoken a word in 4 years. Not a whisper, not a sound. The only noise that ever came from her was the soft rustle of paper when she drew pictures. Across from her sat Dr. Iris LeMay, a kind woman with tired eyes and a warm smile. She held a clipboard full of notes, months of therapy sessions that all ended the same way, with silence. Nora's adoptive parents, Greg and Alina Rivers, sat quietly in the corner of the room. They had brought her home from the foster system when she was just 4. They loved her deeply, even though they had never heard her voice. Dr. LeMay pointed to the latest drawing in Nora's hand. It was a crayon sketch of a girl standing alone in a wide, empty field. No sun, no trees, no flowers, just space and silence. "Nora," the doctor said gently, "can you tell me about your picture?" Nora looked up. Her eyes were a deep brown, wide and thoughtful, like they had seen too much for someone her age. She blinked once, then looked down again. No answer. Alina shifted in her seat. "It's always the same," she whispered to her husband. "She listens, she draws, but she never talks." Greg placed his hand over hers. "We're not giving up," he said softly. "Not ever." Dr. LeMay nodded. She had worked with many children over the years, but something about Nora was different. There was something behind those eyes, something waiting. She just didn't know what would bring it out. The session ended quietly, like all the others. The family stepped outside into the soft afternoon light of the countryside. The sun was starting to drop, casting long shadows over the Montana hills. The air smelled like grass and dust. The Rivers lived on a small ranch about 30 minutes from town. It was peaceful there. Rolling fields, a few cattle, a red barn that looked like it belonged in a painting. They had hoped that the quiet life would help Nora feel safe. And in some ways, it had. Nora loved to watch the fields from the car window. Her head rested against the glass as they drove home. She didn't speak, but she noticed everything. The way the clouds moved slowly across the sky, how the cows flicked their tails when flies landed, the dust that floated up behind the tires on dry roads. "She really watches the world," Greggy said quietly as he drove. "She feels it," Alina replied. They were just a few miles from home, taking the old country road that curved past the eastern edge of their land, when something made Greg slam on the brakes. The tires crunched hard, on gravel, the car skidding to a stop. "What on earth?" Alina began, but stopped as she saw it. There, lying across the narrow road like a fallen tree, was a huge black bull. Its body was still, but its chest rose and fell slowly. Blood darkened its side, and one horn was chipped. Its eyes were open, staring up at the fading sky. Greg swore under his breath and threw the car into park. "Call Dr. Voss," he said quickly. "Tell him there's a bull down on Route 12. It looks bad." Alina fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking. But in the back seat, something unexpected happened. Nora was already unbuckling her seatbelt. She opened the car door slowly. Her parents didn't notice at first. Alina was too busy dialing, and Greg was staring at the injured animal. Then he saw her. "Nora?" But the girl didn't answer. She stepped out of the car, her feet light on the road, and started walking. "Nora, no!" Alina shouted, opening her door, ready to run after her. But Greg reached out and stopped her. "Wait," he said, his voice strangely calm. "Just look." Nora walked slowly toward the bull. The animal didn't move. It just watched her. She stopped a few feet away, then took another step. Then another. Her face was calm. Her movements gentle, like she had done this 100 times before. But she hadn't. She had never been near an animal this big. Still, she showed no fear. Alina held her breath. What is she doing? I don't know, Greg whispered. But something's happening. Nora knelt beside the bull's head. Its breathing was rough but steady. Blood stained the road around it. She reached out a hand and placed it gently on the bull's side. And then, quietly, so softly it was almost missed, she whispered something. Her parents stared at each other. Did you hear that? Alina asked, eyes wide. Greg nodded slowly. She said, something. Nora looked back at the bull. Her lips moved again, her voice small, but real. It was the first time she had spoken in 4 years, and it all began with an injured creature who couldn't speak either. Nora didn't flinch. As she placed her hand on the bull's side, the animal, heavy and bleeding, lay still on the cold asphalt. Its eyes met hers, and something deep passed between them. A silent understanding. She whispered again, barely louder than the breeze. I'm here, she said. Behind her, Greg, and Alina stood frozen. Alina had one hand over her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't make a sound. Greg's eyes were locked on Nora, filled with disbelief and something else. Hope. The girl who hadn't spoken in 4 years had just whispered to a wounded animal. The bull's chest moved slowly. Its breath was rough and labored, but it stayed, still under Nora's small hand. She didn't cry, she didn't panic. She simply stayed beside him, her voice soft and steady as she spoke. It hurts, I know. But you're not alone. Alina's phone buzzed in her hand. The call to Dr. Ellery Voss, the town's veterinarian, had gone through. He was on his way, with his truck and trailer. But even the thought of professional help arriving didn't shake the magic of what they were witnessing. Greg gently took Alina's hand. Let her stay, he whispered. Let her finish whatever this is. Minutes passed, but they felt like hours. The only sounds were the bull's labored breathing, the distant wind moving through the tall grass, and Nora's voice, quiet but strong. She told the bull about the barn at home, about the soft hay, about the chickens she fed each morning and the sunsets that turned the fields gold. She didn't even seem to realize she was speaking. The words simply flowed, like a stream finally breaking through a dam. Then the rumble of an engine cut through the silence. A dusty truck pulled up behind them, its headlights bouncing off the gravel road. Dr. Voss stepped out, followed by Dale, a neighbor who'd heard the call on the emergency radio. Dale was strong and weathered, with years of ranching behind him, but he looked uncertain now. Voss approached slowly. Is she talking? He asked Greg quietly. Greg nodded, unable to speak himself. The vet walked carefully toward the bull. He kept his eyes on Nora, not wanting to startle her. Hey there, he said gently. Mind if I take a look at him? Nora nodded without speaking. She kept her hand on the bull's side, as if holding him together with her presence. Dr. Voss crouched and examined the injuries. Blood was still seeping from a long scrape along the bull's flank. His left leg was swollen and a horn had clearly broken on impact. But miraculously, there were no deep wounds, no broken bones that he could feel. He's lucky, Voss muttered. Really lucky. Got hit hard, probably by a truck, but nothing vital's broken. He just needs time and rest. The vet looked at Nora again. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. He's calmer than I would have expected. The bull let out a deep breath, eyes still locked on Nora. She smiled softly and whispered, We're going to take care of you. Alina stepped closer, her voice shaking. She's speaking. After all this time. Dale, who had seen animals all his life, shook his head in wonder. That bull should be in a panic, thrashing around. But look at him, like a dog at his owner's feet. Greg looked at the vet. Can we move him? With help, Voss said. I've got a small sedative in the truck. Won't knock him out completely, but enough to get him on the trailer without hurting him more. Voss returned to his truck and prepped the injection, while Dale and Greg discussed how to lift the bull carefully. They would need ropes, strength, and patience. Through it all, Nora didn't move. She stayed right beside the bull, whispering about home, about safety, about healing. She seemed to be talking to herself as much as to the animal. When I stopped talking, she said softly, it was because the world didn't feel safe anymore. But maybe it feels a little safer now. Alina's tears returned, sliding silently down her face. The sedative was gentle. The bull's breathing slowed but remained steady. With Nora still close by, they guided him carefully onto a heavy-duty trailer. Dale drove slowly, with Greg following behind, in the family truck. Inside the cab, Alina held Nora close. The girl leaned her head on her mother's shoulder and spoke again, words rolling out like they'd been waiting for years. I think he was waiting for someone to help him. I think I was too. Alina didn't answer right away. She couldn't. Her heart was too full. The road ahead wound back toward the ranch, and the sky glowed with the last light of day. Inside the trailer, the bull lay quietly, and in the truck, a little girl who had lived in silence began to rediscover the sound of her own voice, one quiet word at a time. The trailer pulled into the Rivers Ranch just as the last light dipped below the hills. The barn stood quiet and waiting, its open doors glowing in the soft light from inside. Greg and Dale had worked quickly while Alina stayed with Nora, preparing a large corner stall with fresh straw, clean water, and soft blankets. Nora stepped down from the truck before it fully stopped. She didn't run, but she moved with purpose. Her eyes were on the bull who lay still in the trailer, his breathing steady but weak. Let's take it slow, Dr. Voss said as he climbed out of his truck behind them. He's calm, but we don't want to spook him, and he's heavy. They worked together, Greg, Dale, and Voss, carefully setting up a lift to help guide the bull out of the trailer. It took a good 20 minutes to ease him onto the ground, using soft ropes and quiet voices. Nora stood close the whole time, talking to the animal in a low, gentle tone. She had named him Stone. Because he's strong, she said simply, even when he's hurt. No one argued. Once Stone was safely inside the barn, they backed away to give him space. But Nora stayed by his side. She sat cross-legged in the hay, one hand resting lightly on his back. The bull's ear twitched occasionally, but otherwise he didn't move much. It was like he knew he was finally safe. That night, Nora didn't come inside. Alina brought her a sandwich, but it went untouched. On a plate beside her, Greg set up an old rocking chair just outside the stall and offered her a blanket, which she accepted with a small smile. The barn was quiet, except for the gentle hum of crickets and the soft breathing of the animals. You sure you want to stay out here? Greg asked. Yes, Nora said. It still amazed them, hearing her voice, soft but sure, as if speaking had never been a problem at all. I want to stay with him. So they left a nightlight on and gently closed the barn doors. Inside the stall, Nora kept talking to Stone. She told him about her favorite tree in the back pasture, the one with the swing Greg had built. She told him about the time a baby calf licked her shoe and wouldn't stop following her for days. She told him about the little green journal she kept under her bed, where she used to write things she couldn't say out loud. Then, slowly, her voice changed. Her words grew heavier, like they came from somewhere deeper. I remember the night, she said, the one when everything went quiet. Stone's ear flicked again as if he understood. I was at home, before Greg and Alina. My parents were laughing in the kitchen. It smelled like cinnamon toast. I was coloring in the living room using my favorite markers. Nora paused. Her hand tightened slightly on the bull's shoulder. Then the alarm went off. I didn't know what it was. My dad ran in and told me to go outside. He picked me up. I remember the heat, the smoke. I remember the flames. Her voice broke, but she kept going. I heard them yelling, but I didn't see them come out. People were everywhere. Lights, sirens. Someone put a blanket over my shoulders. I kept waiting for them to find my parents, but they never did. Tears rolled down her cheeks now, mixing with the dust and straw. I stopped talking after that. The words just disappeared. I didn't want to speak without them. It felt wrong. Like if I talked, I'd forget their voices. She looked down at Stone, whose dark eyes stayed on her. He didn't move, but he didn't look away either. I was so afraid that no one would ever understand. She reached out and gently touched his ear. But you did. Somehow you made it okay to speak again. Not just about now, but about back then too. The barn stayed still. The wind outside had picked up, and thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. A storm was coming, but inside the barn everything felt peaceful. Greg peeked in at one point and saw Nora still talking, her back against the stall, her face turned toward the bull. He quietly closed the door again, wiping his eyes. Later that night, as rain began to fall on the barn roof, Nora finally curled up on a pile of blankets near Stone's head. He didn't move when she lay beside him. He just breathed slow and steady, as if her presence calmed him. Wrapped in the blanket her mother had brought earlier, she whispered one last thing before closing her eyes. You gave me my voice back, so I'll use it to keep you safe. The storm outside rolled in fully then, wind pushing through the trees and rain tapping steadily on the roof above. But inside the barn, a girl who had lived in silence for so long finally slept, no longer alone. Morning sunlight filtered through the cracks in the barn walls, casting soft golden stripes over the straw-covered floor. Nora opened her eyes slowly. She had fallen asleep beside Stone, her small hand resting gently on his thick, warm fur. The bull was still lying down, but his breathing sounded better. His eyes were open, calm and alert. When Nora sat up, Stone made a low, soft sound, like a deep sigh. She smiled. Good morning, she whispered. The door creaked open and Greg stepped in with a warm cup of tea in one hand and a thermos of water in the other. His boots were muddy, and his face looked tired but peaceful. Thought you might be awake, he said. You slept out here all night? Nora nodded. I wanted to. He wasn't alone. Greg handed her the tea. Neither were you. Alina arrived a few minutes later with fresh hay and a tray of warm breakfast, eggs, toast, and jam. She kissed Nora's forehead, tears in her eyes as always lately. But these were the good kind, the kind that only come when something lost has finally been found. Dr. Voss stopped by just after sunrise to check on Stone. He smiled in quiet amazement as he watched Nora help feed the bull, gently lifting a bucket of water and speaking softly to her new friend the entire time. This is healing, he said to Greg. For both of them, I've never seen anything like it. Over the next few days, Stone grew stronger. He began to stand for longer periods. His appetite returned and the color in his eyes brightened. And Nora, well, she didn't stop talking. It was like someone had opened a door inside her, and the words had been waiting for years to come, pouring out. She talked to everyone now, her parents, the vet, the ranch hands who came to check in. She asked questions. She told stories. She even started to laugh again. One afternoon, she brought out a notebook and sat beside Stone, writing something quietly for a long time. When Greg asked what she was working on, she looked up and said, "It's for him, a letter." That weekend, something special happened. Word had spread around the area about the little girl who had spoken for the first time in years. The neighbors, curious and kind, came by with small gifts, bags of feed, flowers for Nora, homemade pies. Some had tears in their eyes when they saw her walking through the barn with Stone close behind. They decided to hold a small gathering. Nothing big, just some folding chairs in the pasture, a few tables with snacks and a warm summer breeze. But it felt like something more. It felt like a celebration of healing. Nora stood beside Stone, who now wore a simple blue cloth around his neck. She held her notebook in one hand, her mother's hand in the other. "I wrote something," she said, her voice clear and steady. The small crowd grew quiet. Even the cows in the distance seemed to pause. "It's called The Voice That Belonged to Two," she said. "Because sometimes when you lose your own voice, you need someone else to help you find it." She looked at Stone, then at the crowd, and began to read. Once there was a girl who forgot how to speak. She kept her words in a box so deep inside her that she almost forgot they were there. Then one day she met someone who couldn't speak, either. Not with words, but with eyes and breath and stillness. And together they remembered how to be brave. Together they remembered how to heal. And when the girl spoke again, she realized her voice was never gone. It was just waiting for the right reason to return. There wasn't a dry eye in the pasture. Even Dale, who'd said earlier he didn't cry at anything, wiped his sleeve across his face and muttered something about dust. Later that evening, the sun dipped low across the field, setting everything in golden light. Nora and Stone walked side by side slowly across the pasture. The bull's limp was still there, but it didn't slow him down much. And Nora, holding a long piece of ribbon in one hand and brushing her fingers through the tall grass with the other, looked lighter than she ever had. Alina turned to Greg. "She's different now." "She's herself," Greg replied. "Maybe for the first time." As they stood watching their daughter walk beside the animal who had somehow broken, through her silence, Alina added quietly, "Do you think it was a coincidence that we found him that day?" Greg shook his head. "No, I think they were meant to meet, both of them carrying something heavy, and somehow they shared the weight." That night, as Nora tucked herself into bed for the first time in her room, instead of the barn, she looked at her parents and said something simple, but powerful. "Thank you for waiting." Greg kissed her forehead. "We always knew you'd come back." Nora smiled. "I never really left. I was just quiet for a while." Outside the window, Stone rested in his new pen, peaceful under the stars. And somewhere in the quiet darkness, two hearts that had once been broken beat softly together, finally whole.